All right, let's get into one of the wildest stories in TV history. Seriously. It's all about how the greatest show of its time had this bizarre, almost unbelievable connection to a real-life mob family. And get this, it's a family that ultimately got taken down because they were obsessed with their own TV show.
So that line you're looking at, that's not from an episode of The Sopranos. No way. That is a direct quote from an actual FBI wiretap. You're hearing real mobsters, sitting around, talking about a show they were totally convinced was about them. And that one belief, that one conversation captured on this recording, would eventually be the key that unlocked their entire criminal world.
Which brings us to the big question, right? For years, everybody just assumed The Sopranos was pure fiction. But what if the real story, the actual story, was hiding out in plain sight, just across the river in New Jersey? Let's dig in and find out.
Okay, so first, let's meet the Decavalcanti family. Now, in the grand world of the mob, these guys were, well, they weren't exactly superstars. The big five families over in New York literally called them the farmers. Can you imagine? They were seen as this pathetic stepchild, the B team, and they were desperate for a kind of respect they could just never seem to get. And this is where things start to get really weird. On the left, you've got the icon Tony Soprano, and on the right, Vinny Ocean Palermo, the real-life acting boss of the DeCavalcantes. So check this out. Both ran Jersey families, both lived in big suburban mansions, and both of them, they led crews that were, let's just say, often comically incompetent. The parallels are just starting to stack up, and it's pretty wild. Oh, but it doesn't stop there. Not even close. Let's look at their businesses. Tony Soprano had the Bada Bing, his strip club that was a front for everything. Well, Vinny Ocean had a real deal, all-nude club called Wiggles. And for him, it was his main source of legit cash and, just like Tony, a constant source of legal headaches. And you're not going to believe this one. Even their hangouts were basically mirror images. Tony's crew, they met at Santani's meat market. The real DeCavalcantes, they met at Sacco's pork store, which was located less than 200 yards away, in the same town. I mean, you could literally throw a rock from the real mob hangout to the fictional one. It's just insane. So the big question is, how did this guy, Vinny Ocean Palermo, become the real-life Tony Soprano? Well, his story starts way at the bottom. He actually got his nickname Ocean from working at the Fulton Fish Market. But he was ambitious, He married the underboss's daughter, and pretty quickly he got this reputation as a street-smart guy who was willing to do the things other people weren't. See, in the mob, you don't just get a promotion. You have to earn your spot. And the ultimate test, the way you really prove yourself, is by making your bones. And it's exactly as brutal as it sounds. It's a rite of passage. You have to commit a murder to prove your loyalty. For Vinny, his big chance came as a favor for probably the most famous mobster in America at the time. So John Gotti, the boss of the powerful Gambino family, he asked the farmers over in Jersey to handle a hit for him. The target was this real estate developer named Fred Weiss. So on September 11, 1989, Vinny was part of the crew staking out the house. Weiss walks out, and bam, it's over. Vinny's role in the successful, high-profile hit for Gotti meant he was golden. He could do no wrong. He had officially made his bones. So now, Vinny was officially a made man, a full-on soldier in what was basically a highly organized criminal business. Here's how it worked. At the very top, you have the administration. That's the boss, underboss, and consigliere. Below them are the capos, the captains, who run their own individual crews. Those crews are made up of soldiers, the made men, like Vinny. And then at the bottom, you have the associates, who do a lot of the dirty work and have to kick money up the chain. Vinny was in. He was officially in the club. And what exactly was the business? Well, it was all the classics you'd expect. We're talking illegal gambling, loan sharking with insane interest rates, controlling labor unions, construction extortion, insurance fraud, medical fraud, and of course, the heavy stuff: robbery, assault, and murder for hire. Basically, if you could make a dishonest buck from it, they were in. And now Vinny was entitled to his cut of the pie. So for years, the DeCavalcantes just kind of flew under the radar. But then, in 1998, everything, and I mean everything, changed. This new show, you might have heard of it, called The Sopranos, hits the airwaves. And all of a sudden, this small-time New Jersey family finds their entire lifestyle at the center of a massive cultural phenomenon. Now, you've really got to understand, for these guys, this wasn't just another TV show. For a family that was constantly dismissed as farmers, The Sopranos was pure validation. Suddenly, they weren't just mobsters, they were famous. The show gave them this romantic image, this aura of pride and respect they'd never had before, and they absolutely loved it.
And I mean, they fully embraced it. Get this, they would literally stop what they were doing, their criminal activities, to go home and watch the show every week. This quote here just captures their attitude perfectly. There was no surprise, no, hey, that's weird. To them, it was totally natural that a hit TV show would be made about their lives. Of course it was.
And this is where it just gets bizarre. It created this feedback loop. The show's writers always insisted they hadn't based it on the deck of Volcantes, but it didn't matter. The mobsters saw themselves on screen. And then, according to FBI surveillance, they started imitating the show. They started talking like them, acting like them. The line between art and life, it was blurring in a really, really dangerous way. But all this newfound fame, it came at a price. It put a massive target right on their backs. While they were sitting around enjoying their celebrity status, the FBI was watching. And their downfall wouldn't begin with some big, dramatic shootout. Nope. It would start with one of the most incompetent, ridiculous heists you can possibly imagine. Okay, so it all started with this, what became known as the moron heist. A mob associate plans this huge $3 million score at the World Trade Center. The only problem? The crew he hired were, in his own words, a bunch of morons. I mean, they got off on the wrong floor. They steal a bunch of worthless foreign currency by mistake, and then, for the grand finale, they take their masks off and smile right at a security camera. You just can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, so they were caught almost immediately. Shocker, right? The FBI goes to the mastermind, this guy Ralphie Guarino, and they give him a very simple choice. You can go to jail for a very long time, or you can join Team America and start wearing a wire. Well, he chose to become a rat. And just like that, the FBI had their man on the inside, right in the heart of Vinny Ocean's crew. And this, right here, is the ultimate, most perfect irony of this entire story. As Ralphie's wire is recording everything, what does the FBI hear? Over and over again, they hear the DeCavalcantes comparing themselves to the characters on The Sopranos. So later, when their own lawyers tried to argue in court that they weren't a real crime family, the prosecutors just played the tapes. They used the mobsters' own words, their obsession with the show, to prove that they were exactly what the show portrayed. So with years of this rock-solid wiretapped evidence, the FBI was finally ready to make its move. And that so-called code of honor, that sacred oath of silence that was supposed to be the bedrock of the mafia, it was about to completely shatter. On December 2nd, 1999, it all came crashing down. In one single, massive, coordinated sweep, the FBI arrested 40 members of the DeCavalcante family. It was just this unprecedented takedown that effectively decapitated their entire organization overnight. So Vinny Ocean gets caught, and he's facing life in prison. But unlike the old-school mobsters who would have just done their time, Vinny, he made a different choice. The real Tony Soprano, the head of the family, did the one thing you're never supposed to do. He broke the code of silence. He flipped. He agreed to cooperate with the government. And once he did, the floodgates just opened, and dozens of others followed his lead. And what happened to the once feared Jersey mob after all this? Well, this quote from an expert really sums up their decline perfectly. Their power was completely, utterly broken. The mystique was just gone. They went from being this invisible force to, well, struggling for relevance in a world that had totally moved on without them. Which leaves us with one last kind of fascinating question, doesn't it? Vinny Palermo, the real guy, he vanished into the witness protection program. His real-life family crumbled into total obscurity. But Tony Soprano, he lives on forever. He's an icon. So in the end, did the fictional character on TV become the only real, lasting legacy these men ever actually had?